Hello and welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. On today's episode, we are breaking down the Tropic Thunder 2 Volcanic Boogaloo. I thought I could get through it without laughing. We are breaking down the CEDH tournament here today, a 72-player person event out there in Utah, which will be, as we are going to be showing a little bit later, they're going to be having a 10K with this same group. And if those who've been watching the channel for a long time may have noticed that I've actually talked about the Salt City folks for quite some time. We'll talk a little bit more about their next event later. But right now, we're going to break down Tropic Thunder 2 Volcanic Boogaloo. Darn it, I was so close. If you like videos like this, make sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button. Check out patreon.com/comedianmtg, where we're working up a goal towards getting a new camera for the channel. Got a wedding to pay for this year, so the support really needs to happen over at patreon.com/comedianmtg, where I'm also going to be, as I mentioned, reviewing and assessing the $25 tier that we have on the channel and basically having that ready to go. Make sure to, if you're on that tier, we're probably going to be removing it towards the end of March, I'm assuming, and then replacing up the new tier. So just so you know, if you are on that tier right now, that's something that's going to be adjusted. Quick side note, but of note, the 5th place player that is there in the top 16 bracket did actually get a DQ from this event. It seems like some combination of basically the MTR's definition of bribery or collusion. So what you will be seeing is 17, or I guess 6 through 17 being mentioned, and then 1 through 4 being mentioned. But you'll notice I'm not mentioning the 5th place deck on the EDH top 16 page, as I mentioned, because they did receive a DQ from this event. So without any further ado, now let's break down these top 16 decks. In 16th place, we have Steffer here with Salt, Atraxa, Stuffy's Way. This is a CEDH Atraxa list that is doing some different things with the Atraxa piles than some folks would traditionally note. I mean, the big thing here is without a lot of reanimation, it really is just Atraxa neoforming or Eldritch evolutioning into a Hoarding Broodlord, which is really, really interesting with this list. For those who aren't familiar with the Hoarding Broodlord combo, you're basically trying to get a Hoarding Broodlord, saw it in half, and then create some sort of combination of spells and cards with that Hoarding Broodlord. Really interesting to see. We have a Gandalf here. I know some people were talking about Gandalf when it's first spoiled as an Atraxa card, but I hadn't yet seen that reality come to play. So the idea that you can flash in Gandalf at end step and then sort of hold up a double Atraxa enter the battlefield ability at any time from that point is pretty sweet. And it really is nice because one of the biggest things you always hear Atraxa pilots complain about is this part where you have to go, oh yeah, I have to tap out for my 7 mana commander, which is a huge investment and makes you go shields down for an entire rotation on the table. And when we're looking at a version like this one that not only needs Atraxa to do the normal Atraxa draw a bunch of card stuff, but also to potentially transform itself into a Hoarding Broodlord, the Atraxa becomes more and more of a priority to get down, but hopefully not at an inopportune window. Hence the inclusion of a card like Gandalf here. We have Enduring Vitality, a new pickup for some of these Atraxa lists. I love seeing Kinnan in here. I've said that like time and time again, the amount of Atraxa lists that are not playing Kinnan blows my mind. I think Kinnan is so necessary when you have, once again, a 7 mana value commander in the command zone. I think you definitely need some of that natural ramp to help get you up to a larger mana value commander like Atraxa is, if you want to do so in any sort of consistent way, especially now that we no longer have Mana Crypt, Jewel Lotus, things like that to help propel you into the Atraxa plan itself. The main win conditions in this deck. Oh, I'm actually curious. Okay, so I see the saw in half. I do see the payoffs there. We do have only culling the week, so there's no sacrifice for the Broodlord lines. And I see Beseech the Mirror, which I'm assuming has some sort of correlation with how we get to the saw in half Atraxa lines. So if we have a saw in half Broodlord, you're able to Beseech for like a food chain, I guess. There's a bunch of different ways I've heard of folks going through these lines in the past. So I would definitely be curious from the pilot themselves how their main transition from going Broodlord, saw in half, make 2 Broodlords, how is that turning into, and now I win the game. I'm assuming it's some sort of Beseech into a food chain thing, because that's what I've heard pilots going for in the past, but I definitely would be curious to hear about this individual case as well. Cool stuff here out of Atraxa. Atraxa is not a deck that I feel like gets iterated and innovated on as much. I feel like a lot of people just sort of stick with the stock list and go from there. So cool stuff from this Atraxa pilot. We have Omnath here with Omnath. This is their Omnath Locus of Creation deck. Fun fact, I actually played against this pilot with this deck at the Snowy Summit event. And we've actually worked on this deck together in the past through coaching. So it's kind of cool to see not only a deck that I recently played against, but a deck we've worked on in the past here and performing well with this pilot. Omnath is one of the few people I know who has even made Omnath a thing, and especially made Omnath a thing after the Dockside ban. Because a lot of people saw Dockside as one of the main reasons to be able to play Omnath was going through the Dockside and meal lines. You have sort of the food chain backup lines if that's something you're pursuing and stuff like that. Now, Omnath, a little textless in this current rendition of the card, but many enter the battlefield abilities. One, when it self enters, ETB draw a card, and then 3 different stages of landfall triggers when you have this card as well. This is a tagged deck list, but we're going to disable the tags just for ease of safety there. We have Teferi and I believe Displacer Kitten combos here in the deck, which is cool because Displacer Kitten has a little bit of cute synergy with Omnath, right? Every non-creature spell suddenly cantrips because you just flicker your silly little bean commander and make that work there. Uro is a really interesting innovation that I saw John play last time we were in a pod together, and the ability to make that extra land drop and then be able to put in pieces like your Dryad Arbor, which can be a combo outlet with Omnath and other things like that. It's actually a really cool innovation for this deck, and not to mention Uro, at the end of the day, worst case scenario, it's a little bit of value when you push towards the late game, and especially in a breach-oriented deck like this one, if you get into a graveyard and get to play it for the green, blue cost, you can actually use it as a grind engine if the game goes long, which is something really important because unlike with Thrasios Bruce or Thrasios Akiri, the other decks in these colors, you really don't have as many options for a grind plan like you do with the Thrasios decks. With Omnath, it doesn't really come like that. This is much more of a breach forward deck. As we saw, there is a breach in this list. This is also playing the traditional Ephemerate Spellseeker lines. For those who don't know, this is a very convoluted line, but it basically turns Spellseeker into a 1-card combo. We were able to play Spellseeker, grab Ephemerate, flicker the Spellseeker, go grab a Final Fortune, take an extra turn. On the upkeep, you flicker the Spellseeker again. You get the pieces to basically 1 card assemble everything you need for Underworld Breach. You need something the equivalent of I think it's 6 mana, and you need the ability to have a certain amount of cards in graveyard to recast the Ephemerate, to get the Spellseeker, to get the Brain Freeze. It's a whole thing. But point being, Spellseeker becomes a 1-card combo in these colors. And the thing with the Sans black colors is they have a hard time tutoring things that aren't creatures as efficiently as other colors, right? So when you are able to tutor something like a Spellseeker pretty easily in these colors with all the green tutors available to you, it becomes pretty easy to turn Spellseeker, this 1 card, into a full breach line by itself, which is a really nice distinct way to just go 1, 2, 3, we've got a combo going. And then as far as combos outside of breach and the Teferi Kitten combo, I don't think we actually do have any, funny enough. So there's very few hard infinites in the deck because there's no flicker effect, something like that allows you to go truly infinite. So definitely a deck that's very much not using Omnath as that infinite flicker potential, but just using Omnath as that clean, hey, here's my outlet, all that kind of stuff. But much more using the land drops for the breach plan, using the land drops to get you a bunch of mana for the Displacer Kit lines, etc., etc. Congrats to Omnath for this top cut. ToaMagic.com. When you want your best Magic single, check out ToaMagic.com. They have an amazing inventory. You can pick up your selections on location at a number of different events. Toa has almost 100,000 unique cards in stock, free track shipping on every order, and next day or 2-day shipping available, as well as the on-site pickup that we've talked about a lot here on the channel. So you can check out ToaMagic.com and use code Comedian to get 5% off of your order. We have cEDH. I think that's supposed to be some combination of Sisay and EDH, but this is how we're calling it. We have Paradox Phantoms here, Sisay list here in the top 16. Now, Sisay hasn't been breaking into the top tables as much as it was before the Dockside bans, but we're still seeing Sisays pop up now and again. Now, this is one of the really interesting non-Planeswalker line Sisay lists. This list is doing a few more things, focusing more on the Emil Fabro Derevi lines, Emil Derevi Cradle, or Emil plus Derevi plus the Bloom Tender Fabro, etc., etc. Also able to play Underworld Breach in the deck. So this is definitely a little bit more of a hybridized list. It's not fully it's actually really close to how the old Clam Chowder style decks. Am I seeing Kinnan Basalt Monolith in here? I am seeing Kinnan Basalt Monolith in here. Is there some sort of outlet that I'm missing for infinite colorless mana apart from Agatha's Soul Cauldron? And if that is the case, then that's hilarious and awesome. But that's a really cool thing that I've never seen before in a 5-color Sisay list. That's super interesting. That definitely gets the creative juices flowing, but this is definitely a rather off the wall Sisay list here, having a few of the traditional Sisay combos, and I guess definitely falling into the category of what I would consider like that classic clam chowder style deck that I think a lot of people just assumed was no longer going to exist after the ban. So kind of cool to see these this sidestep of Sisay plans here in this top 16. Really cool innovation here from Paradox Phantom, trying to keep the clam chowder dreams alive for the cEDH version. We have Rograkh Tymna S22 Ekoi here with Bad Rogsai or Bad Blue Farm. I love this deck, this name. This is Rograkh Tymna, a Turbo Mardu deck here. I love seeing a Wandering Archaic in a Turbo deck. I think this is one of the most underrepresented defense grid style effects in Turbo decks. So it's really cool to see it here in the cEDH list. This list is trying to use Rograkh and for sure trying to go fast, but maybe not in the ways that we would traditionally expect, because this is a Turbo Bolas' Citadel deck and not a Turbo Ad Nauseam deck. Actually, no Ad Nauseam even to be found in this list, which is really, really interesting. Wins with Dual Caster Twin Flame or Dual Caster Molten Duplication. But yeah, this seems to be a Turbo Bolas' Citadel deck, which is really, really cool because as I said, that's not traditionally how these Rograkh style decks tend to go, is just omitting Ad Nauseam entirely. But it does make sense given the higher curve in these colors that it would be a little bit harder to go with the traditional Nas plan. As a huge fan of Bolas' Citadel, I'm really geeked to see this list, and it's pretty sick. So yeah, really cool stuff here from this Rograkh Tymna deck. A lot of folks really underestimate this pairing, compared to the tongue-in-cheek nature of saying, bad Rogsai or bad Blue Farm. But here we have a pretty succinct way to win with this strategy. I think it's really interesting too. The Bolas' Citadel lines do sort of answer one of the big questions with these Turbo Rog Mardu decks, which is always like, how do you actually win the game? The dual caster lines, like I mentioned, are a thing, but also having the Aetherflux Reservoir in here to work with the Bolas' Citadel and Sensei's Dividing Top line makes things pretty clean after you've assembled your mana and get your Citadel online. So basically, you get Citadel, you get one tutor, and you're very, very likely to win because Sensei's plus Citadel really draws you the majority of your deck as soon as possible. Really cool stuff here from this list. We have Goatcaster here with Goat Farm. I'm assuming it's just Blue Farm, but their name is Goatcaster, so they called it Goat Farm. So far, my instincts has not led me astray. This seems to be a pretty traditional Blue Farm list here, but it's by Goatcaster, so it's called Goat Farm. We have Necro lines here in the cEDH deck. We got Final Fortune as a payoff. We have Born as a payoff for the Necro Alliance here. Do we have any creature flash enablers? So no. Valley Flood Caller, interesting. So just Born and Final Fortune as a way to pay off for Necro. We have the traditional Ad Nauseam that you would find in most of these Blue Farm lists, the ability to pivot between Underworld Breach lines using Intuition as a payoff for some of those as well, and the usual Ad Nause, Breach, all that kind of stuff, and the classic Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation / Tainted Pact lines in the deck as well. So congrats to our favorite Blue Farm playing goat. We have Nobody P1 with God Help Me. This is another Blue Farm list. So let's throw it in the comparison page here on Moxfield and see the differences between our two decks. Now, one difference we'll note right off the very beginning is there is a certain lack of goat in this second list, which I think is very important. All right, so the difference is Goat Farm is on Mnemonic Betrayal, Fairy Mastermind, Mystical Tutor, Culling the Weak, Professional Facebreaker, Archivist of Augment, Cyclonic Rift, and Undercity Sewers, whereas our second list is on Dispel, Mirror Maid, the Flash Enabler that I mentioned, Valley Flood Caller, Copy Enchantment, definitely double ways to copy Ristic Mystic, plus more card draw and Polywog Prodigy, and a few more pieces of interaction here in this second list. So a little bit more interactive, but still same old Blue Farm minus the goats. So next in our top 16 is a Stella Lee list that is not currently available. If you see this, it means the tournament organizers were not able to get me the deck list, but this was a Stella list, and they are currently in the process while I'm recording to film they're trying to get that list right now. So we'll see. So want to shout out the people who are responsible for this video. Salt City is now having a cEDH convention at the end of May. What that basically means is it's going to be a very large cEDH tournament, but they're basically making a cEDH con, which is going to be super, super sick. So it's not just going to be a cEDH 10K, which is the main tournament of this event. It's going to be a cEDH 10K in Utah at the end of May. But also, they're going to have a redemption event on day 2 that's also included in your entry fee, as far as my understanding. The redemption event is included, which is also a 3K. So even if you show up, go to this convention, they have a bunch of stuff available. Even if you miss out on the main event, you have a 3K that you're eligible for the very next day. So yeah, the Salt City cEDH Con is going to be awesome. I've been covering events of Salt Cities for 2 or 3 years now, and they are a beloved organizer group. They have basically taken the non-existent cEDH scene in Utah and made it a really, really vibrant thing, to the point where people are talking about their meta throughout the country, right? So Salt City cEDH Con, I am super excited to be attending this, and it's going to be an absolutely awesome time. There's going to be so many crazy things going on, but yeah, the fact that there is a cEDH 10K tournament happening in this space, end of May, go check it out. We have Kadok81 here with Yuriko cEDH. It's been the first time I've seen Yuriko in a hot minute. I feel like the Yuriko pilots really lost a lot of momentum post-ban when we were all like, hey, Yuriko's going to be better now. And then it wasn't, unfortunately. But Yuriko is up here making a top 16. We got the new Kaido Band of Nightmares, one of the biggest boons Yuriko's ever gotten in my time playing cEDH. And apart from that, this is the classic turn and burn ninja Yuriko style. Cool new Force of Despair art. But TLDR is, this is classic Yuriko. It seems a lot of them are moving on to this Patchworks banner, which is a mana rock that also buffs all of those ninjas. Cool stuff there. A lot of them have moved on to Blood Chief Ascension as well, which I think is a really sweet addition to the Yuriko suite. Cover of Darkness, giving a little bit of evasion to all of your ninjas as well, making sure they're connecting, flipping over these high mana value spells, and so much more. Energy Conversion, one of the best win cons in the deck, making everything a Yuriko, except it's not legendary, and then able to flip over a little bit of damage that way. And apart from that, you're trying to do either Thassa's Oracle lines or just flip in a bunch of ninjas with their ninjutsu abilities and deal a bunch of damage to your opponents with all of your higher mana value spells. Really cool to see Yuriko still getting some top cuts. We have Lisby here with Bloodpod cEDH, the pilot who is actually putting some respect on Bloodpod. I have not seen basically anyone else do anything with Bloodpod in several years, but Lisby has shown up and continues to do work with this Bloodpod list. Bloodpod really putting up some crazy results here. Basically, the idea is that you are playing a stacks deck in 4 colors with Tymna and Tana in the command zone. You are not afraid to play Blood Moon, even though you are a 4-color deck yourself, and only play a few basics. No, fear is not for you, Bloodpod players. The only thing that you know is stopping your opponents. This deck is very Kiki Twin heavy, right? So you got things like Splinter Twin, Kiki Jiki to combo with your bottom half creatures. Things Kiki goes with Felidar Guardian. Kiki also goes with Bellringer. Bellringer goes with Jolly Balloon Man. Village Bellringer also goes with Splinter Twin. There's a lot of layered combos in this deck that happen to work with these creatures. Hyrule Tower Scout also works with Kiki. Does not work with Bellringer because you need an extra mana, but it does work with the Splinter Twin too. So this deck's saying, hey, at some point I will be making infinite creatures, and until then, stacks. You will not be able to activate artifacts. Ironically, the name Blood Pod does refer to the birthing pod that is almost always in these lists, even though they are very happy to play Stony Silence and Null Rod and Collector Roof to say nobody gets artifacts, but you know, if they do for some reason, I still win with them. You also have Vivian, which wins with these Blood Pod lines as well. The pod line in this scenario, for those who are not familiar with it, is you go from a 3-drop. So, for example, Tymna in the command zone. You can go up from Tymna to go grab a Felidar Guardian to either flicker your birthing pod or your Vivian. You then activate another time because it's a new game object, meaning it hasn't activated this turn. You are then turning your Felidar Guardian into a Karmic Guide, which reanimates the Felidar Guardian, which then flickers the pod and or Vivian. You then activate one more time, sacrificing the Felidar Guardian. You go get Kiki Jiki, which then makes a copy of Karmic Guide, which flickers your Felidar Guardian, which flickers your birthing pod or Vivian. Then you have Kiki and Felidar on the board together, and guess what? That wins some games. So yeah, that is how you do it. Actually, sorry, in that last rendition, I think I said Felidar flickers the Potter Vivian. You don't do that. You flicker the Kiki, which then goes infinite with Felidar Guardian. So that all being said, this list switches between disruptive pieces like Drawn on Linvala, Magus the Moon, Ranger Captain, Mayhem Devil, stuff like that, and then transitions that into a bunch of infinite creature combats. And sometimes just things like Big Mommy Norn, just to remove your opponent's toughness and make your creatures big and strong. Here we have Co V with Talion. You play, I draw. This is the most classic Talion of all Talions. This is a Talion list where your whole goal is to stick a Talion and then make your opponents bleed out slowly at the table. If you notice, there's no traditional win cons in the sense that there's no black win cons that we would expect. No Ad Nauseam, no Volus Citadel, nothing like that. No, Talion is here to slowly drain the life out of your opponents, if not win with a Demonic Consultation plus Thassa's Oracle style win. The rest of it is oppression wins, things like Sheoldred and Bowmasters, and using things like the enchantment Bloodchief Ascension. You are literally trying to bleed your opponents to death slowly over the table, but not slowly enough that you will go to time during the Swiss rounds. This is a pretty sweet Talion list. Good to see Talion still out there. It's another list that has sort of been quiet for a bit of the post-ban period. I think a lot of people were struggling to figure out how to play the deck post-Mana Crypt, post-Jeweled Lotus, but here we have top 16 with it, and great job to our pilot. We want to thank one of our sponsors today, Heavy Play. Heavy Play is already a sponsor that we love and adore working with, but they have new products available that I have to shout out today. So Heavy Play not only has their amazing deck boxes, their amazing dice trays, their amazing play mats, but now they have a bunch of new products in line. First of all, they have a magnetic play mat tube. So it's a magnetic tube that allows you to stick it to your deck carrier and slide your play mat into it, and you can have that go along with you anywhere if you're not using the Heavy Play mats. The Heavy Play mats, we got to shout out, have brand new artwork that is now available. So originally the Heavy Play mats were just super clean, super easy to use, but didn't have any art featured on them. Now they have an amazing mock series that has one for each color of, red, all the whole Wooburg. I was able to grab a red Mox mat, which you can see in the picture right here, and I'm super excited about it because I think it is gorgeous. Not only do they have a full Mox suite, but they also have a breathtaking Black Melodious mat, which sold out in Chicago almost immediately. So go check out these new products. And not to mention, on top of all the things we already mentioned, if you have a number of Heavy Play deck boxes, you're going to want a place to store those. Now we have actual deck box carriers, which you can once again see in this photo, able to carry all of your Heavy Play products, and it's super, super awesome. So Heavy Play has a ton of new products. You got to go check it out on their website. Heavyplay.com/comedian gets you 10% off your order, which is a good amount given the fact that we've got a ton of new products coming in from Heavy Play. I cannot shout out this brand enough. I love working with them, and their products are absolutely insanely cool. And I'm super geeked to finally have a Heavy Play mat that, once again, I use for every tournament without them asking me to, but one that has some super sick artwork on it now. We have Johnny Beast 36 with CEDH. Guys, this is a defensive One Ring. I feel like I've said that name before. It's just a real attack at the opponents right there at the very beginning, which I think Lisby listened to if we've learned anything. But this is a Jhoira. This is a Jhoira Ageless Innovator deck, a deck that is trying to tap its commander and then put some stupid artifacts into play. You can do things like chain activations by doing things like Corridor Monitor. You can put in the artifact counterspell of Diversion Unit, which is kind of cool because you can like sandbag this for a hot minute, and then your opponents put a crazy spell on the stack. You're like, all right, cool, tap Jhoira, put in Diversion Unit. Now I have a counterspell and a stick. Boom, countered your thing, which feels really nice because then they have to counter an ability, right? Which is, it's pretty sick, actually. I really love that tech from our pilot here. Filigree Sages is in here. Usually that goes infinite with Chromatic Orrery, which I would expect to see down here in the artifact. Oh my goodness, how many artifacts? 32 artifacts, not including the artifact creatures in this list. We have the brand new Iron Man from Marvel, able to come in here and basically do the same stuff that the deck is trying to do in general, except for it allows you to, be your artifact pod effects. We've got Memnarch in here, yeah, just gaining control of all the permanents when things go a little bit crazy. You have Treasure Mage to go put in your giant artifacts into your hand. And yeah, the rest of the deck is just a bunch of interaction, things to untap your commander so you can go again, and then a bunch of stuff to cheat in the battlefield to either disrupt your opponents, like with Grafdigger's Cage or Torpor or Runestone, really just saying no to what your opponents are doing, or to try and win with things like Karthland Ironworks. It allows you to start going through some loops, including sacking Ungin's Nexus, making you take extra turns, and a bunch of crazy stuff like that. So really, really cool stuff here out of Jhoira. I love seeing these just crazy artifact decks between this and Arkham Dagson and decks like that. I think there's so many fun over-the-top artifact decks that can exist in the format. Got to shout out the brand new Repurposing Bay, which is the same as Iron Man in the sense that it is an artifact birthing pod. Really sweet stuff from our player here, and always cool to see a spicy deck like Jhoira able to tap, play some awesome artifacts, and go from there. Yeah, y'all can read that one. Have fun. This is Folkstar with a Dihada list. What am I reading? This is Dihada, Binder of Wills. I feel like Dihada was one of those decks that just disappeared right after the bans, but now I've been seeing more and more results with it. And funny enough, several other results that have been best record leaving the Swiss with the ability to then unfortunately lose in the top 16. But Dihada's still, out here making putting some respect on the name. It's the most aggressive Mardu Turbo Breach deck out there right now. If you have your commander Dihada plus Underworld Breach, the classic staple, plus Flicker, you're actually able to encourage a loop where you're milling one extra card every time you go through the loop, and you're able to make 2 treasures every time you go through it extra. So very quick way to net a bunch of extra treasures and a bunch of cards in your graveyard for Breach, and then turn that into a win through some other means. A lot of these have been hybrid Broodlord lists lately, which usually involve like Broodlord into Saw in Half, but this one's not doing Saw in Half stuff. So yeah, I guess it would probably just be like Broodlord into Adnos. Or they had Sacrifice or Burnt Offering. Okay, yeah. So I guess you're Broodlording into an Adnos with a bunch of mana left over, or a Citadel, I guess, too. So there's a lot of really cool stuff there with that. There's a hybrid like Reanimator plan here, but also just classic Turbo Breach plan. You're doing Nas, you're doing Citadel. What's really cool about Dihada in particular is that if you have Magda and just one other treasure, you're able to play your commander, get 4 more treasures, go activate Magda, and then put a Citadel right into the battlefield. So, for a turbo deck, it's got some higher mana value permanents in here, but the rest of the deck is really just trying to absolutely get your opponents dead ASAP and go as fast as possible. You got dual caster, twin flame, molten duplication style lines in here. Just molten duplication, I guess, is the weapon of choice. Really cool stuff here from this Dihada list. Dihada is a deck, as I mentioned, that I didn't really think was going to survive these bans, and yet it's here. It's still putting up some numbers, and if anything, it's having a little bit of a resurgence after the Dockside ban, which is kind of cool. Good for this list, and good job, Folkstar, on your list. Before we get into the top 4 of this video, I want to remind you we do coaching here on Comedian MTG. So if you're looking to take that next step up in your cEDH gameplay, you can contact me at comedianmtg@gmail.com or at any of the places in the link tree that is in the description of this video. We have so many cool things going on right now, and if it's before March 8th, there's actually a sale going on where you can actually get 20% off up to 2 hours of coaching as sort of a thank you to the community for helping me get out to the fishbowl. So really cool stuff there, and yeah, coaching has been going super awesome lately. There have been people that I've worked with in this very tournament, and a lot of my coaching recipients have been doing pretty well in these tournaments. There's a lot of stuff down the pipeline. So if you're interested in, for example, attending the follow-up tournament to this very event, you can check me out at comedianmtg@gmail.com or any of the places in that link tree. I do have the most wins on diverse decks of any competitive player right now, and as well as a resume that lasts years past a lot of my contemporaries and peers. So if anyone's curious about any of that stuff or the resume that's attached to my career, why you would want to get coaching from me, feel free to reach out in any of those places, and I'm super happy to answer those questions. Let's jump into our top 4. Oh my God, I cracked my back and it felt so good. We have Sherman 5679 with I'm Gonna Croak in My Cleanup. So this is actually the same list that also top 16'd the Snowy Summit, a Gitrog list that, as I mentioned, Gitrog has not been performing very well in this current metagame, and yet we have 2 top cut performances here from Sherman 5679 with this Gitrog list. We have the classic Gitrog Monster. For those who aren't familiar with the archetype, if you get a discard outlet like Putrid Imp or Cabal Initiate, or let's see, Noose Constrictor, Wild Mongrel, etc., you're then able to discard one of your lands, which is the Dakmor Salvage. And at that point, you're able to dredge through your entire deck, stacking a near infinite amount of Gitrog triggers on the stack, and you're able to leverage a bunch of wins in that case. Now, please don't actually propose putting infinite draws on the stack because Gitrog does have a hard time actually winning from that state, but hopefully that is not a case you force yourself into. This is the classic Golgari 40 land Gitrog style deck that we know and love. A few of the new rooms from Duskworm, which is pretty cool to see. Gotta love the ever classic Chains of Mephistopheles. If you don't know the exact text on it, don't bother reading it. It won't help. Basically, instead of drawing, most of the time you're discarding and drawing. And if you didn't have the ability to discard, you're just milling instead. So really good way to kick off some of the Gitrog loops, as well as a great way to disrupt all of your opponents who are doing the Mystic, Ristic, etc. plan. So really cool way to disrupt that way. You also have Oblivion Crown as another discard outlet that I didn't get to mention earlier. Got Mana Bond in this version, allowing you to reveal your hand and just put all the lands from there. And then you do have to discard the rest of your hand, but guess what? Gitrog doesn't really care that much, especially if you put some fetch lands in that you don't have to crack for the Gitrog cast. It's pretty sweet. So definitely cool to see this turbo Gitrog-y list. Cool to see Agatha's as a bit of an innovation here with these Gitrog lists. There's some really interesting stuff here with this variant of Gitrog. And yeah, actually, there's also Chain of Smog with Witherbloom, which I think is kind of a cool thing for these Gitrog lists to have the ability to pivot a little bit. I will say there's definitely some choices in these that I think are more modern, more updated, which was one of my complaints about older Gitrog lists, is that I felt like they were just sort of copy and pasting what had worked in 2018. But that's clearly not what's happening here. So congrats to our pilot for putting some new respect on the Gitrog name in this new format. We have Kane Energy here with cEDH Tivit, Riddle Me This. Classic Tivit, Seller of Secrets, Esper list here. This is one of the slower Esper options out there because Tivit is a great grind engine. Gives you the ability to make treasures and clues when you go to combat or when it enters the battlefield. You have Teferi, Time Raveler, and Displacer Kitten loops here with this deck. But wow, oh wow, are there some cool stuff here in this Tivit list that you don't expect. This is probably the most creatures I've ever seen in a Tivit deck. You have Ocelot Pride here to double your potential Tivit tokens, which is pretty sick. You've got the Academy Manufacturer, basically making it so every time you make any of your clues or tokens, you're making one of each of the aforementioned clue, food, or treasures. So that gets out of hand really, really quickly. You have Kumbal, the Profiteering Mare, able to drain your opponents of life when your tokens come in. Notably, your treasures coming in together doesn't drain individually, but your individual investigate triggers do. So whenever you would make clues with Tivit, because it specifically says investigate, that would trigger individually. We've got some top end counter spells with Nimble Obstructionist being a stifle that cantrips itself. We have Tishana's Tidebinder, another stifle effect. Grand Arbiter, Augustin the Fourth. We have Mondrak, just saying double all of my tokens, double all my clues, etc., etc. Grev, Grim Hireling. There's a lot of ways to make artifacts with this Tivit list. And this one definitely has a lean away from the classic Tivit options here, which traditionally Tivit's much more of a control deck. Very few creatures, a lot of board wipes. And this deck does have those things. Oh, Arcane Denial and Trickbind in the interactive suite, which is kind of interesting. You do have the classic time sieve win condition in this deck, although what's really cool about this variant is it seems like you can win with time sieve even without your commander, which I think is pretty cool. And I guess it's also pronounced time sieve for any of those out in the audience who are going to correct me on that. Then you also have your Thassa's Oracle Thematic Consultation win cons. This is a really cool take on Tivit and playing some really atypical stuff here to try and go over the top of what your opponents are doing. So really cool to see this top 4 Tivit list. And congrats to our pilot for the top 4. We have Fizzle here with Rocky Mountain Rooster. Atraxa mid-range. So speaking of Atraxa at the start of this top 16, we have Atraxa the Grand Unifier here once again. We have a Kinnan in the 99 and Enduring Vitality in the 99. We got to compare these two lists and see the differences between them. Although notably, no Broodlord, no Gandalf is a very interesting start. So there's actually 16 differences between these Atraxa lists. So we have things like demonic consultation not in this Atraxa list, and a bit of the acceleration, the culling the weak, things like that. A piece of interaction like mana drain. No neoform makes sense if you're not trying to neoform into a drop like Broodlord. You know Colossal Sky Turtle in this original list that we're seeing here, and then no Talon Gates. Whereas in our top 4 version, you have the addition of Solitude, Phantasmal Image to double up on your Atraxas after you resolve the first one. We have Clever Impersonator to copy your opponent's advantage engines. We have Talion to just be another advantage engine of your own. Court of Calling to get your creatures in early. Culling Ritual, which is and Cyclonic Rift. So the original top 16 list, the one that was in 16th place, did not have any of these board wipes, Culling or Cyclonic. So good to see there. This one's also on Emergent Zone, which definitely helps in some of those grindier games to be able to win over the top of what your opponents are doing. Endurance to shuffle your library back in. So definitely some interesting differences between these two lists, some differences in interaction, some differences in payoffs. This one is super clone heavy, which is really interesting. And a lot of really cool stuff here from this cEDH Atraxa. Atraxa not seeing a lot of top 4s lately, so a lot of respect to our pilot for bringing the respect to the deck. I know we've mentioned it here in the channel before, but the Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament is coming up, and it is halfway through this March. So by the time you're watching this video, it's like a week and a half away. So get your tickets now if you can. There is going to be a large cEDH tournament that will be during the course of this event. There are going to be some crazy prizes. I've been talking with the TO of this event, and I've gone to their events before. I really enjoy the folks over at Crimson Lion Games, who are the people running this event through the Hunter Burton Memorial Tournament, and they're really excited to have cEDH get represented because this is the first time a major cEDH event has shown up as part of this event. So come check it out. It's for an amazing cause. It helps to fund for suicide awareness, and it's going to be an amazing cEDH tournament with, I can't give away exactly what the prizes are because I'm told to be quiet about it, but let's just say there is a lot of very solid prizing on the line for the cEDH event, and it's going to be a really, really good time. We have Manboy Libs with TNT's Critter Farm. This is Tymna Thrasios in the classic Tymna Thrasios mid-range style. Some interesting stuff here with this list is that this one's a little bit more proactive, I will say, than some of the other Tymna Thrasios lists that we've seen here in the recent performances. It's on Banishing Knack lines with Valley Floodcaller, meaning if you have a bird, otter, rat, or frog, you're able to tap and untap them whenever you cast non-creature spells. And if there's a Banishing Knack on one of those permanents, you're able to bounce rocks over and over again and recast them, generating infinite mana as long as they're netting positive mana. We also have Devoted Druid here, which combos with Hazel's Brewmaster when it's in the graveyard, or with the Swift reconfiguration we see over here in the Enchantment Suite. We have Basalt Monolith for our Kinnons. So definitely some classic mid-range Tymna Thrasios stuff, but we're also on things like Culling Ritual and Ad Nauseam in the deck. So definitely has the ability to, if the read is wrong for the table, basically, go a little bit faster than the classic Tymna Thrasios shells are traditionally known to do. So some cool stuff here from that. I'm assuming this is definitely more of an end step Ad Nauseam style effect anyways. I'm not expecting to see a lot of these Turbo Naz style responses from this Tymna Thras list, but congratulations to our pilot for taking down the whole thing with TNT. Funny enough, the first TNT we see happens to be the one that takes down the whole thing, but I like seeing the innovation here. I think this is probably going to come out after our most recent episode of the Mind Sculptors when we talk about TNT a great deal, where I've said people have been sort of settling into a comfort zone with the list, but I'm glad to see a list like this one where there's a couple different options that people aren't quite expecting, because I think TNT is more flexible than Tymna Crom, and it's nice when people can use that as a payoff. So congrats to all of our pilots here in this breakdown. Thank you all so much for watching this cEDH Top 16 breakdown. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I'll catch y'all next time. Peace.